Hello everyone and welcome back to my Warhammer 40k guides. I am Brady and today it's time for the top 10 Warhammer 40k armies of February 2019. For those of you who are new to these videos, it's a list I make of the armies that place top 5 more often at all of the GT and major events during the month of February that are listed on the Best Coast Pairings app. The armies that are higher up on the list had more placings in the top 5 during the month of February, with the tiebreaker being what those placings actually were. Also, I define armies the same way the ITC does. Whatever sub-faction had the most points spent on it is the primary faction, and all other detachments are allies. So with all of that out of the way, let's get into what you guys and gals came here for, and that is the top 10 Warhammer 40k armies of February 2019. Number 10. Adeptus Mechanicus. The Cogboys are back on the list this month with one 4th place finish, which was at the Las Vegas Open Champs Tournament. I've already talked about this list in my coverage of the top 8 armies of the LVO, but I'll still briefly talk about the list here. But if you want a better and more in-depth explanation of the list, then check out that video of the top 8 coverage. But anyways, this list was a battalion of Stygies Admech, a battalion of Cadian Astra Militarum, and a super heavy auxiliary detachment with the dreaded Knight Castellan. This list, like most Imperium lists as of late, farms up a ton of command points to dump on the Castellan Knight. But unlike most Imperium lists as of late, this list actually has other options as well. This list really wants to go first and abuse the Stygies stratagem that allows them to move their Stygies units 9 inches up the board before the game begins. So if the army does get to go first, then they move their Dragoons and the drill with the priests up the board 9 inches before the game even begins. And then on turn 1 they get to move the Dragoons their normal distance and also get the priests out of the transport for 2 easy charges against the enemy. This nets some really good damage, especially with the Dragoons, but also puts threats in the enemy lines immediately that have to be dealt with, otherwise they can cause a lot of problems for the enemy. This means the Castellan might not even have to rotate its shields that turn, since a lot of the anti-tank might be being shot into the Dragoons instead to get rid of them as soon as possible. And if this is the case and ends up happening, then this means you get to save command points for stuff like Order of Companions, or better known as the I Hate One stratagem for the Castellan. And although this list really likes going first, it's not that bad if it goes second either. Sure, they don't get their immediate pressure, but most of the stuff in the list is fairly durable either through negative to hit modifiers or good saves. And the stuff that doesn't have either of those can just hide behind a wall. Overall, I think this is a really good list that has some really cool strategy behind it, and I'm glad it made it into the top 10. Number 9. Necrons. That's right, we have another bionic army making its way into the month's top 10. For a long time, there were a lot of people complaining that Necrons were the worst army in the game. And to be fair, before Chapter Approved, they were a good candidate for that title. But after Chapter Approved, Necrons haven't been doing so bad. In fact, they've been doing better than a lot of armies, at least when it comes to the top 5 placings. After Chapter Approved, I think people were willing to pick up the army again and try it out. And some skilled players have actually been able to make the army work. So anyways, Necrons received one 3rd place finish during the month of February to slightly beat out the Admech for its spot on the list. So this list is pretty much geared to deal with the Knight meta, which is one of the reasons I think variations of this list are doing really well. It brings 3 Doom Scythes, which can block enemy Knights' movement pretty easily while being immune to charges unless the enemy has melee units with the fly keyword. And a lot of Knight armies right now aren't including such units anymore, since Smash Captains cost a lot of command points you'd rather spend on the Castellan, and Custody Bikes are really just expensive, so it's hard to fit them in a list with Knights. The list also brings 3 Doomsday Arcs, which are great in the Castellan meta because of quantum shielding. The Castellan will normally do a ton of damage on each shot, so it's not hard to roll less than that damage on your quantum shielding rolls, which means it's actually kind of difficult for things like the Castellan to kill the Doomsday Arcs. The only thing that the Castellan really has that's good against these things is the Kull's Wrath Plasma Gun, because then your quantum shielding roll will have to be a 1 or a 2, which is only a 33% chance, but I mean, it's better defense against the Castellan than most armies normally have. On top of that, they have a decent amount of anti-tank to deal with the Knights as well, alongside the troops who deal with the enemy infantry. Overall, I'm glad to see Necrons in the top 10 armies again, 2 months in a row even. Number 8. Jeanstealer Cults. Jeanstealer Cult makes its way into the top 10, number 8, with one 2nd place finish during the month of February. This is the first month after their codex released, and to be honest, I figured we'd see a lot more placings from this army after looking through their codex myself. But admittedly, the codex seems very complex, and I think maybe a lot of people just haven't figured out what to do with it yet. It's not as simple as something like the Knight Codex, which basically equates to put Ion Bulwark on the Castellan, put Kull's Wrath on the Castellan, feed him a ton of command points to make him a superhero, or use a ton of giant giant durable models that the opponent will have a hard time dealing with if they aren't spamming anti-tank and just Hulk smash everything. The new Jeanstealer Cult seems like a blue deck from Magic the Gathering to me. It has a lot of tricks it can use to throw off the opponent, like the whole blip deployment thing. Being able to deploy your army as blips and then put down more blips to further confuse your opponent, being able to move these blips around, and even being able to change your mind and deep strike some blips if a good opportunity arises. These blips also basically means you get to choose how you deploy your army after your opponent has already set up their stuff and moved on turn 1, which in my opinion can be abused heavily by a good player. On top of that, they have a cheaper version of Agents of Ect, but it's only one use per game. But as a Drukhari player myself, I can tell you that I'd much rather have the Jeanstealer Cult version than what Drukhari currently has, since I normally only use Vect once a game anyways, but I have to spend 4 command points on it. So in my opinion, I think the 3 command point once per game version is better, since command points are extremely important. And you don't need to use Vect multiple times if you are knowledgeable about the matchup and know how to play around the enemy stratagems like other armies have to do normally. Getting back on topic of the Jeanstealer Cult though, they also have some really good combos and are the first army in the game that can move after deep striking with their stratagem that allows them to move d6 inches after deep striking to get some easy charges. This can make the charge against the target out front even easier, or it can give you access to charging units that were originally outside of the 12 inches from your initial deep strike, but are now within 12 inches because of your move after the deep strike. There are also combos with 20-man Brood Brother squads that can be fearless and also take orders from allied company commanders, and on top of that there's a plethora of other combos from the codex. Essentially, this army has a ton of options and ways it can be played, and to be honest, I think we will see more placings from them in future top 10 lists once people have figured out all of the army's intricacies. Number 7. Deathwatch. The Night's Watch take the black at number 7 this month with a single first place finish. Unfortunately, I don't have the list to show you guys and gals, but I can at least talk about what I think makes the army good for the current meta. Since chapter approved, Deathwatch now has access to really cheap storm shields, and with the bolter discipline beta rule, they now get a shit ton of shots with their storm bolters that also have access to their special ammunition. On top of that, they are the only army in the game that can mix different units. For example, you can have a Terminator or 2 of them inside a squad of your normal Marines. This means you can protect those Terminators or Bikers with your regular Marines, kind of like you would protect a last cannon in a tactical squad by taking out the chaff models first when they die, which gives the unit more wounds overall. This works especially well because of the storm shields on all the normal veterans. And you want to protect those Terminators and Bikers now because of the new bolter rule, which allows Terminators and Bikers to get rapid fire all the time. Combine this with a watch captain to reroll 1s, and you're going to have some really good efficiency when it comes to your hits. They also have their mission tactics, which allows them to reroll wound rolls of 1 against a certain type of unit, so stuff like troops or fast attack or heavy support. In today's meta, you usually pick troops, since we live in a meta where spamming troops is extremely popular due to battalions and brigades giving so many command points. This synergizes really well with their special issue ammunition because they can choose Hellfire rounds, which wounds everything except vehicles on a 2+. This means with a squad with 2 Terminators, 1 Biker, and 5 veterans, you get 22 shots if you move, and 32 shots if you don't move or are just in regular rapid fire range from deep striking in, or just moving up the board. They hit on 3s, re-rolling 1s because of the watch captain, wounding on 2s, and re-rolling 1s because of your mission tactics. This army is amazing at deleting chaff infantry in today's meta. And chaff infantry is pretty much all we really see in the meta, at least on the top tables, since Space Marines have kind of fallen off of the face of the earth, other than Deathwatch. And even if you do face normal Marines, you have Kraken bolts or Vengeance rounds to help deal with those. So overall, they are pretty durable because of the way you can form up their squads with multiple storm shields to eat the high AP shots, or use the Terminators to eat up the 0 AP shots, and on top of that, they also do a decent amount of damage against infantry. So you can do stuff like bringing a battalion of Deathwatch and a battalion of Guard, and of course a Castellan. The Castellan destroys all the vehicles while the Guard grab the objectives, and the Deathwatch deals with the infantry. It's a pretty good combo in my opinion. So overall, I'm glad that the Night's Watch, the Deathwatch, have made it into the top 10, so we have some Space Marines represented. Number 6. Inari. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. To be fair, they haven't fallen by much like my beloved Drukhari have, but they still have fallen a bit nonetheless. During the month of February, Inari had 2 top 5 placings with a 2nd place finish and a 5th place finish, with both of those being at the Las Vegas Open. Personally, I still feel Inari is one of the stronger armies in the game. I'd even go as far to say that they're still top 3. So if this was a tier list, then that's where I would put them. But this list is based off of the results from X month, so here they are. I assume we don't have more Inari placings this month because maybe some players just got bored of using that army and moved on to the new hotness like the Castellan and Friends, or even Thousand Suns. Or all of the skilled Inari players attended the LVO and no other events in February, which seems very reasonable to me. This is just speculation though, so take it with a grain of salt. As for my thoughts on the stated Drukhari, however, when you break the game down, essentially every unit you own will get to quote-unquote act 6 times in ITC missions, or 5 to 7 times in other missions. This means that during a single game, each unit will move 6 times, shoot 6 times, or fight in combat 6 times. And this is only if they live that many rounds. Inari, on the other hand, break that and do it pretty easily. And sometimes a unit can act 7 to 12 times in a single game, depending on how long it lives, or have instances where a single unit acted 3 times on a single turn. This gives the army way too much power in a game where the vast majority of armies are limited to these 6 actions per game. I know I seem heavily biased against the army in every top 10 where I talk about them, but it's honestly because I feel that they are the only army in the game that isn't fair. To be fair in my analysis though, Inari does have a high skill floor and probably the highest skill ceiling in the entire game, so a new player just can't pick up the army and go 5-0 with it at a GT or major. But when a skilled player pilots the army, it's ridiculously good and feels a bit unfair to play against, at least in my opinion. With all that said though, let's not make the mistake I normally make and leave Inari on a bad note. Let's say some good things about the army first. Sean Naden's list is really cool. Number 5 and 4, Chaos Demons and Thousand Suns. So I did something different this time around, as you can see, and I'm going to talk about both of these armies at the same time. Reason being is because these armies are essentially the exact same armies, give or take a few units. A couple armies had a few more points in Thousand Suns and Demons, and a couple armies had a few more points in Demons and Thousand Suns. But every one of these armies included both Thousand Suns and Demons. So Demons had 2 placings in February with a 1st place finish and a 4th place finish. And Thousand Suns had 2 placings in February with 2 1st place finishes. So Chaos Demons are in 5th and Thousand Suns are in 4th based on a technicality. If that technicality didn't exist, then Chaos or Ahriman and Friends would be 3rd on this list altogether. But anyways, these lists are basically just Ahriman and Friends, which is Ahriman plus a few Thousand Sun Demon Princes to get access to their amazing spells, and also because they are pretty decent in close combat. They also have a screen of Plague Bearers to help them get up the board and deliver them into glorious melee combat. A few things I'd like to mention though, is that there are actually a couple of units in these lists that don't really see much play on top tables. In one of the lists, we have a Bloodthirster of Insensate Rage. This bad boy hits like a truck and is one of the best melee units in the game when it comes to offense. But it lacks some defense with its 3+ armor and 5+ invulnerable save, plus it has so many wounds, so even though it's a character, it can still be targeted. Its invul can't be changed to a 4+ though with a relic, so there's that at least. Another one of these lists uses Blightlord Terminators, who only got better with the use of the Beta Bolter rule. They are disgustingly resilient and hard to remove, and great to deep strike in your opponent's backfield to sandwich them in between them and your normal army. And then in one of the lists we have Jeanstealer Cult Terminators. I was saying in my chapter approved review that I think these guys might be good now, and I'm glad someone topped an event with them. With the new Beta Bolter rule, they got a huge buff as well, so now they are rapid firing all the time with their -2 combi bolters. And with the buffs you can give them through spells, you can make them decently survivable as well, or even more efficient with stuff like Prescience. Overall, I'm glad we're starting to see some variety with Ahriman and Friends, and I'm happy my favorite Legion is still topping events. Now before we get into the top 3, let's give a couple of honorable mentions. These armies had top 5 placings during the month of February, but didn't quite make the cut onto the actual list. So this month, we have Sisters of Battle and Craft Worlds. I think Sisters of Battle is actually really good with their new beta codex. Sure, a couple of things were nerfed, but overall the army is still really solid in my opinion. And I would even play the army myself if it didn't cost thousands of dollars to build one. And for Craft Worlds, I think they have one of the best codexes in the game, but are just outshined by Inari currently, which is why I feel we don't see more regular Craft Worlds on the top tables. Because why play Craft Worlds when you can play Inari, since they are pretty much the same army, give or take a few units from Drukhari or the Harlequin Codex. And now with the honorable mentions out of the way, and before we get into the top 3 armies of February, this video and many others were brought to you by the channel's Patreon. Patreon is the main source of income for the channel, and it allows me to concentrate on Warhammer 40k full time. Without the generosity of my patrons, this channel wouldn't be anywhere near where it's currently at today. So first off, a big thank you to all of my current patrons. I appreciate and love you all very much. And for anyone that enjoys the channel and would like to help support it so that I can grow the channel and do even more things with it, on Patreon, I offer many different tiers of pledges with many different rewards. For example, I have a $5 tier that gets you access to the Almost Pro Gaming Discord server, where you can chat with either myself or over 100 other patrons about Warhammer 40k. You can get your army list critiqued by myself or other patrons if you're looking for multiple opinions, and we now even have the channel's painting partner, 9.5 Miniature Painting, in the channel if you would like to get some painting tips as well. You can get all of this for what equates to basically a couple of cups of coffee. There are also other tiers that offer custom list building, one-on-one coaching with me, or even requesting video topics for future videos, and many other things. And again, for my current patrons who are already supporting the channel, I can't say it enough, but thank you all very much. Without you guys, the channel wouldn't be where it's at today, so again, big thanks, I love you all. So let's finish off the video with the top 3 armies of February. Number 3, Tau Empire. The Tau are back in the top 3 again for the month of February with a 3rd place, 4th place, and 5th place finish. So these lists are slightly different from each other, but not by much, to be honest. They are all mostly Tau Sept, with one list including a Cicada detachment and the other list including a Borcam detachment. So every list features a bunch of drones and some Riptides, as they are pretty much staples in all Tau lists right now. That combo is just too good to not use in my opinion. We also have a bunch of commanders, with one of the lists opting to use Shadow Sun. Lots of strike squads and pathfinders, and for the unique things, one of the lists uses an Avara battlesuit, which has a ridiculously good flamer, so it helps with dealing with stuff like Eldar flyers, although most of the suits in this list are bringing velocity trackers to help with that as well. The list that has a Borcam detachment uses it for the pathfinders to give them a bit of extra range to help get those marker lights on valuable targets. Overall, the Tau army has a ton of shooting, and is still one of the better shooting armies in the game. They are one of the few armies that can get away with having no melee or no psychic stuff in their list. And they are a great anti-melee army as well because of their ability for the greater good, which is basically supporting fire and Overwatch. And because they're Tau Sept, they Overwatch on 5s instead of 6s. Number 2, Imperial Knights. The Mechanical Titans of the Imperium are back on this month's top 10, coming in second. During the month of February, they had 2 second place finishes, a 3rd place finish, and a 5th place finish. Like I kind of alluded to earlier when talking about the Jeanstealer Cult, Knights are a pretty easy army to pick up and do well with. In my opinion, it's probably the lowest skill floor of an army, but still has a decent skill ceiling as well, so they can still be piloted very well by veteran players. I've been saying for a while that Knights are kind of an anti-meta army, and for the most part they still are, even though they are now meta themselves. This is because we have things in the meta like Orcs and Astra Militarum and Eldar and Chaos Demons, and ton of armies that spam infantry or small models. And if you gear your list too hard for taking on Knights, well then you will suffer against those previously mentioned armies. And if you gear your list too hard on taking on those armies, well then the Knights kinda get you. Knights kinda keep the meta honest, and stop it from slanting too hard in one direction or the other, which in my opinion is a good thing. If Knights didn't exist, I am very confident in saying it would be 100% okay to just spam a ton of anti-infantry, and you'd be doing alright since most armies are mostly infantry based, and most vehicles in the game you can just bad touch in close combat to make them useless. So Knights bring something to the table, pun intended, that forces players to really think about their options when building their lists. Like I previously stated, I really do think Knight armies are good for the game. The only problem I currently have with Knights is one Knight in particular, but that's only when it gets overloaded with buffs from stratagems, warlord traits, and relics. It's the Castellan Knight for those of you who may be unaware. And I actually have a couple of videos where I discuss the current state of the Castellan. One video is appropriately called Let's Talk About the Castellan, and the other video being my interview or discussion video with the LVO winner Brandon Grant. So if you want to hear more about that topic, then feel free to check out those videos after this one. Number 1. The best army in February goes to Grey Knights. I'm just kidding, it's Astra Militarum. Sorry to pull on your heartstrings there, but I thought it would be funny. So Astra Militarum or Imperial Guard are back on top this month with a 1st place, 2nd place, and 2 3rd place finishes, and a 4th place finish during the month of February. So 2 of those lists are from the LVO that just recently passed, and I already made videos on them, so if you want to hear me talk about those lists, then check out those videos. But for now, I'm just going to talk about the other Guard lists that place well at the other events this month. So to start out, we actually have 2 of these lists being pure Astra Militarum lists. That's right, no allies. The first of these 2 lists is an all-Cadian list, featuring Pask, some tank commanders, a tech priest, a lot of troops, some heavy weapons teams, some basilisks, wyverns, and even manticores. The second list is even more unique, and has a Tallarn brigade with some company commanders, a bunch of troops, 5 chimeras, some armored sentinels, and some heavy weapons teams. It also has a battalion of Tallarn, but this time using the Emperor's Fist tank company formation, and using a couple of tank commanders alongside the infantry. infantry. And for the final detachment, they brought a battalion of Militarum Tempestus using the Tempestus drop force formation. As for the final list to talk about, they used mainly Valhallan with Fearless Conscripts alongside a Castellan Knight. So overall though, I think it's safe to say that Imperial Guard is off to a great start for 2019. So that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more Warhammer 40k content like this. And also, don't forget to check out the channel's painting partner, 9.5 Miniature Painting. I'll have a link to their Instagram in the description. And also, don't forget to check me out on Patreon if you want to help support the channel, or if you are interested in any of the services I offer. So anyways, I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next one. Happy wargaming.